Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Jon Flemister from
Yes, sir.
Arkansas, originally and still?
Absolutely. Still here in Little Rock.
You're not allowed to leave Little Rock?
No, I've been here forever. Never left home.
I visited there. I've never lived there, but a lot of people really, really enjoy it. I think it's a real community.
Yeah.
So got your
Very nice place to live.
Other kinds of things going on. Anyway, Jon's here to talk about his hobby origin story. But first, I want to thank sponsors: Topps Panini Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards, as well as Burbank Sports Cards and ComC.com and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So, Jon, you've been in the hobby a long time. I don't know if it's been off and on, or mostly on, or sometimes off. But I remember you and your dad from the '80s. And tell me about your hobby origin story, and welcome to the show.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. I, like most kids from the 70s, played sports, watched sports, kept up with sports. So the natural progression was just always buying cards. And, anytime I could go mow a yard for $10 and go down to I lived in an area where there were grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations within a bike ride away. And so we just always collected cards, just was really enamored with just opening up a wax pack with a large piece of gum and sorting through cards and, building sets and trading with kids in the neighborhood. And the first year I bought was 75 Topps football. And then that eventually went into 76 baseball. But, really just anything, Jim, Planet of the Apes, wacky packs, hot rod cards, just anything that I could get my hands on. And of course, for Christmas and birthdays, I always asked for either a set or a box or something, and just always loved it. And it's just a great hobby. And a lot of the kids in the area were doing it. And so it was just kind of a way just kind of build relationships and hang out, and just really collected all throughout the 70s. My dad had always been big into coins, especially silver. And when the price of silver got pretty high in the late 70s, he kind of latched onto it. We started buying some larger collections and setting up at a flea market or, just wherever we could, buy, sell, and trade. And then in 1980, we opened up our first store in North Little Rock called The Scorecard. And we were strictly part-time. My dad was an accountant by profession, and just big enough space to, put in some showcases and some shelving and just stocked it as best we could. And we were off and running. We were open just 2 days during the week and then all day on Saturday.
Was that all cards, mostly cards, or still some gold and silver?
No, it was strictly cards, supplies. We had a good relationship with a local candy wholesaler. And so we were able to have all the new product in stock. And then we ran ads throughout the state, buying collections, and went on a lot of wild goose chases and chased down a lot of rabbits. But we did, score some pretty nice collections, and, that kind of got us going. And so we carried both new and old product along with supplies.
I knew your dad was smart, but was he so smart that he got out of silver before it crashed?
Yeah, I think it was just, a little bit of good timing, good fortune. But yeah, silver did take a pretty good drop there afterwards, and so he was fortunate to have cashed out. And so we had a little bit of capital to work with, and he had always been a sports fan, and he actually grew up in a little railroad community called Duplo, Illinois, right across the river from St. Louis. And him and his brother, from the time they were about in 8th grade, would take the train over into St. Louis and sell concessions out in the bleachers. And they got in pretty good with the head guy there. And as soon as they hit their quota, he would just let them watch all the baseball they wanted. And he saw just tons of baseball there at Old Sportsman's Park. So he had a real affinity for baseball, but never really collected anything. But he saw that I had a real interest in it. So it kind of, it was a good marriage, and, just allowed us to kind of, share the hobby together.
What was again, this is music to my ears, and it's a great story. What was the division of labor? In some of the father-son hobby experience, the dad is let me just hear what your division of labor was. What did you do?
It was very interesting. Honestly, I was in the 7th grade, 8th grade when we opened. And during the summers, I just ran it by myself. And he had a full-time job as an accountant. It's kind of interesting. Next to us was a barber shop. And this gentleman had cut my hair, my dad's hair, my grandfather's hair forever. And so he kind of watched, he'd sneak in every once in a while, just peek his head in the door just to see if I was doing okay or if I needed change. But come to find out, he was one of the biggest bookies in North Little Rock, and there were always tons of guys in there, placing their bets, but everybody just kind of looked the other way. And so we had a lot of guys that would, come in because of their interest in sports. And we actually bought several collections from guys that just were coming in to either get the haircut or to place a bet. And so it worked out pretty good. He kind of watched over me while I was there by myself and just never really had any issues. And then my dad would work with me on Saturday.
Well, it sounds like your dad trusted you, and it was a good bonding experience, and that's great. But the other part of this that listeners might be wondering about is because you're a collector too. Your dad, not as much. When you're running this shop and you're buying collections and getting stuff, I mean, how difficult was it for you were you putting some things back of saying, hey, Dad, I want that for my collection? Or were you kind of reselling things that came in, marking them up and letting them go?
Well, there was a lot of temptation for sure. At that time, I was primarily just collecting stuff from the 70s. And so that's how I built a lot of my sets. But occasionally there would be something that would come in, and I'd usually just take, instead of paycheck, I'd just take it in store credit, and he'd let me pick out a few things. So I was able to pick up quite a few older cards that way as well. But generally, I knew the store needed it more than I did, and because we were the only store in town, and so and then we were getting to do some shows, and so it was imperative, we kept it stocked, and so we worked out a pretty good arrangement there.
Were you? I mean, I know you mentioned to me that 57 Topps was near and dear to you, and that that's a key set for you. But at what point did you branch out from collecting these 70 sets to either move to older, which it sounds like you did that, or to newer? I mean, what's your current collecting interest?
Yeah, I pretty much stop around the 80, 81 mark and work my way back. I've got complete sets from 73 to 80 right now, and then partials 70 through 72. So I'm a set builder, just picking them up one at a time, and it takes longer, but that's just the way I prefer. And then big Cardinals fan, so always on the lookout for Musials and Brocks and Gibsons. But the 57 set is just one of those sets that I just always liked, and just the design and the purity of the set, I don't know, it just really resonated with me, and all the Hall of Famers. And of course, Brooks Robinson is from Little Rock, and his rookie card is in that set. And so I just always liked the 57s. In fact, one thing that's kind of always piqued my interest with that set, when we were in our first store, we moved to a bigger location in 1982, and we had a complete 57 set in one of those old 400 count boxes. But somehow in that move, that set disappeared. And so I've just always, it's just been kind of a goal of mine to recreate that set, to build it myself. And I'm down to less than 20 cards and working on it for about 5 years now. And so I'm getting close, but I just always like that set.
I did too. It's, we did an episode on that, and a lot of people like that because it's one of Rich Klein's favorite sets. But, from being around back in the day, one of the frustrations, I was living in the Pittsburgh area at that time, and basically Stan Musial was not in the set. Right. And that was a downer, because he was a huge star. He was probably toward the end of his career, but still a great, great player. He was from Denora, outside Pittsburgh. And so he was popular even there. And we were mystified as young people. And then finally he got back on the Topps, got into Topps with in late 58. But as a all-star card. Yeah, as a Cardinal fan, you probably thinking, why? You've got all these great players in there, Brooks, Sandy Koufax, Mantle, Mays, Aaron Clemente, all these great players. Where's Musial? Ted Williams is there. So,
yeah. Well, and also, Harmon Killebrew, he was left out. His rookie was 55. He had a 56 card, but apparently he got sent down late in 56 or whatever, and they didn't include him. And then, the other one, Roger Maris, he played 116, 117 games in 1957. I thought he warranted a card as well. But just think if those three players would have been in there in addition to what was there. I mean, I don't know, kind of the set that could have been, but still a great set.
Well, what other stuff are you trying to collect? I mean, are you going to shows or popping in on the National anymore and having a one?
No, I mean, of course, with the COVID stuff, most of the shows around here are pretty much shut down. So anything we're doing is online. But I haven't been to the National in a while. But generally, I just pick up things online. There's some Facebook groups that you can I've gotten involved with that's helped out. And then there's just some guys around town that I know that are still collecting various things, and we'll get together, every once in a while.
Any other sets that you're looking for?
Yeah, I've kind of gotten started on the 63. I really like that set as well. I know Rich Klein had said that his favorite was the 67, which to me, that's my second favorite set, but I've always liked the 63. And so out of the 50s, the 57 was my favorite set. And out of the 60s, the 63 was my favorite set. So I guess the end goal is to have a 57, a 63, and then all the 70 sets. And then I'll just, go on to something else.
Yeah, I think it's, I just think it's kind of interesting. My experience was going from a hobbyist to a person in business and then trying now to go back to being a hobbyist. It sounds like kind of your journey that you started out as a kid, you're collecting, then all of a sudden you're in the business with your dad, and you do that for a decade or so. Was that?
Yeah, we ended up opening 2 more stores, and we were in business from 1980 to 1994. And so we had 3 locations.
And then now you just consider yourself a hobbyist. Or to what extent is your hobby that you have now cash flow neutral? Or you just kind of still accumulate?
No, I'm still just accumulating as I go. If I see something I like that's within my budget, I'll go ahead and make a plunge. And I've got a certain amount that I allocate towards my hobby, and I just try to stick with that. And so I really don't have any issues there.
Well, you're a little bit like, you'd be extremely exemplary for what the collectors were of those times that we both lived through. That people
absolutely,
they either work their way forward or back, and generally, most savvy people, to give each of us a pat on the back, work their way back.
Yeah. Well, what I found when we first opened is that we had a lot of guys that had rediscovered their collections from the 50s, but that was also the same time when Fleer and Donruss came on the scene and the hobby was really exploding. And so we had a lot of guys that were crossing over, that were completing older sets, but got caught up in the newer product at the time. And so I think today there's more of a delineation. You've either got people that are strictly vintage, and then you've got guys that are strictly, new product. But we saw quite a bit of crossover back in the early 80s.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Thanks, John. I basically think that's exactly what the hobby is. Part of the appeal is that it can be a hobby of nostalgia, and it can be a hobby of what's the latest and the greatest, and each can enjoy. And I kind of enjoy both. And I've always said collect what you like. Another good note to end on. Thanks, Jon Flemister, for your involvement over the years, and I'd like to get you back on and talk about some other things we have in common in some of our experiences back in the day. So thanks, John. Thanks, listeners. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode.